And then I will just say hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the 1960s, the films from the 1960s with the great Mike Bartlett. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, it's Bartlett.
Yes,
Yeah. Although
Bartlett.
in Australia, it's Bartlett.
Bartlett. Okay, then I know that Bartlett. Yeah, all right. And Mike has been in one of my other videos as well. We did in the Christmas time, which is also on my channel if you haven't seen that.
We're both
Um,
wearing Santa hats in that one, so watch out.
we did, and it was a fun little video. Um, and In that video, you told me, Mike, that the 60s was one of your favorite areas in terms of movies in general. Isn't that true?
I think it's my favorite decade of movies because there's
Yeah.
so much going on. You've got all the old greats like Hitchcock and Ozu and Orson Welles. They're still going, but at the
Mm,
same time, you've got this kind of explosion of creativity in like France and Eastern Europe and Japan and Italy, kind of new art cinema coming out. And there's also loads of like popular genres starting, like Hammer horror, and
mm.
Italian horror and like superheroes is up and going in America. Things like Spider-Man and the Hulk and all that. There's so much creativity; it's incredible.
Yeah.
There's
And
so
you
much
were
going on in the
into
'60s. Yeah,
all these types of comic book films also.
not so much, but when I look back, so much of what we still watch and celebrate, it comes from the '60s. It's
Mm,
amazing. It's an amazing era. So much of modern cinema was kind of crafted in, and how we think about cinema as well, like film criticism, like the auteur theory, all that became
mm.
sort of popularized in the '60s, and that's how we think about movies now, which I think is incredible.
Yeah, definitely understand your point of view. 60s is also, it's not my favorite, but I've always really admired that it's sort of a, how should I say, a transition
Yeah,
phase from the old types of stuff and to the more modern, like you talked about yourself. And in that way, I feel a bit of the same with the 60s as I do with the 30s. In that sense, that the 30s also was a transition phase between that was sort of how should I say they start to develop sound in
yeah.
the 30s, and this is not the same, but uh, like you said, cinema just changes a lot through the 60s.
I know what you mean. Like the '30s, like yeah, you get the development of sound, but also film becomes more sophisticated in how it shows characters and men and women. I think particularly, and then
Yeah,
the '60s, you get the counterculture, you get new ways of looking at the world, and which sometimes clash with each other, but they're kind of really fascinating.
yeah, true. I definitely I agree. Um, but should we start talking
Okay,
about some of our favorite films from the 60s?
sure, yeah, I'd love to.
Mike, I will ask you about the 1960 L'Aventura. Is your favorite from that year?
Yeah, for me, I think of that film as the film that started modern cinema. I thought it was so incredibly brave. You had this story about these friends who go out onto this island for a trip, and then one of them disappears.
Mm,
And you think the movie is about finding her, but actually it's about this relationship that grows between two of her friends. And you just forget this woman. She just disappears from the narrative. An incredibly
mm,
brave thing to do. And when I first saw the film, it's very slow and you're sort of getting used to it. But when you go back and watch it, it's so brave, but it's also really moving. It's a really beautiful film. And I also keep thinking of like Laventura, like 2 years after it was shown, it was voted by critics. They do that sight and sound thing every 10 years when they do
mm.
the top 10 films. It was voted the second best film of all time.
Was it? Okay.
And that
Mm.
shows you what an incredible impact it had. Like nowadays, would anyone pick a film from 2 years ago? It was just
That's incredible. Yeah. I have actually seen it, but it's many years ago. I saw it when I was a teenager. I remember liking it, but uh, I don't know. It's difficult for me to remember totally how I feel about it because it was different than I expected.
Yeah.
But I have it on Blu-ray at my parents' home, so I must watch it one day just to maybe appreciate it a bit more, like you talk about, because that mystery element. I was a bit disappointed about that the first time I saw it.
But that disappointment, weirdly, is part of the enjoyment of the film for me.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
you're sort of yearning to find that woman, but you never find her. She just
No.
disappears. And that's kind of one of the big impacts of the film, I think. Yeah.
But it's definitely I remember for me I remember the main actress the best. Her looks.
Yeah. Monica Vitti, she's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, and the black and white cinematography. I can remember the images
Yeah.
the most, and that element that we never really find out what happens. But I have it, so I have to rewatch it.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
What was your
you
favorite
know,
movie from 60?
it's difficult to choose. I wrote many films down just to think about which is my favorite. I think my favorite for now is the film Inherit the Wind.
Sure.
It's a Stanley Kramer film, and mostly because I just found the subject matter still very relevant, and it's very thought-provoking film. Have you seen it?
You know what? When you sent me the list, I thought I hadn't seen it, but I did see it when I was a kid. I read up
You
about
have?
it. And I
Ah,
remember Spencer Tracy, he's the sort of defense attorney in it,
yes.
isn't he? Yeah. And I remember his big speech towards the end. Yeah. I have seen it.
It's I think I like that it has the conflict between the religious point of view and thing and also the atheist point of view.
Yeah.
Because I think it's quite the depiction of it is quite modern for its time.
Yeah. Sure.
And I can really just enjoy. I find it very entertaining. I rewatched it last year just to review it on my channel, and I found it wow. It's really holds up incredible well, and the actors are amazing. Even Dean Kelly is in it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's great as well.
Yeah. I mean, like Spencer Tracy is one of those actors, like sometimes he's brilliant and sometimes he
Mm.
kind of gets on my nerves. I don't know what it is
I,
about him.
I think I understand your point of view. He's definitely one of my favorite actors, but I understand what you mean.
He's sort of attacking it all the time, isn't he? He never
Mm.
sort of, he never sort of calms down.
Oh, true, true. No, but I think Spencer Tracy and the director Stanley Kramer they made several films
Yeah,
together, and I really think Stanley Kramer, the director, really understood how to get the best out of him as an actor.
yeah, yeah.
Because then I can jump to 1961 because my favorite from that year is Judgment at Nuremberg, which is also a Stanley Kramer film with Spencer Tracy.
And it's also a courtroom drama.
It
So
is with great actors in it, and I don't know what it is. Still, I find it very. I feel the same about it. Like Inherit the Wind, I found it really thought provoking, and I love how it sort of tries to understand the people responsible for the Holocaust. And
yeah,
of course, it was kind of based on a true story. But I really love it. It tries to understand every perspective,
yeah,
and that again, it's from the '60s, and I love black and white stuff. And so there's something about it. It feels in some ways old fashioned and yet so modern at the same
yeah,
time, and I love that sort of thing.
yeah. It's got. I remember the cinematography in it is very kind of metallic, isn't it? It's very
Yeah,
harsh, if I remember rightly. Yeah.
yes. But you have watched that as well.
Yeah, and I remember that was another one. I remember I had seen it because I remember it's got a very young Maximilian Schell in it, and that was
Yes,
the film that made him famous, I think.
that is. I don't know if it was the one that makes him famous, but I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think he have done that as a play as well some years
I think
before.
yeah, I think that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, I think he's the weakest in the film actually. He kind of overacts a bit.
Well, he always does, doesn't he? Yeah,
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 but it's not that he's bad, but I think all the other actors has more subtlety in their performance, and he is a bit more theatrical.
yeah. It reminds me, I don't know if you've seen it, like in the 90s, they made this film called Conspiracy. It's got Kenneth Branagh in it as Heydrich.
I've never seen that. No.
And it's quite interesting because all the sort of Nazi top brass around at a table having a conference about the final solution. And I
Mm.
think if you're interested in Judgment at Nuremberg, you might be interested in that film. It's quite an interesting depiction of them as human beings, as sort of trying to sort it out as a business people. It's
Yeah.
quite chilling. It's quite a good film.
Okay, I will check that out as well.
Yeah,
Um, you have The Innocents from that year.
I had to pick a horror film. I'm sorry, but I love that
It's
film.
okay.
It's the scariest film I ever saw. I was 10 years old when I first saw it, and my dad introduced me to it. And he was enjoying me being scared. And after it finished, he went out in the dark and then banged very loudly on the living room
No.
window. That's called child abuse these days.
Yeah, yeah. So you were terrified ever since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is a brilliant, it's not just a good ghost story, it's beautifully made film, and it had a Truman Capote script, and it's
Mm.
very intelligent. It's really about power relations. It's about how this young governess who goes to look after these two children in this country house, and how she's so desperate to make a good name for herself, and she wants to impress this lord of the manor, and it all sort of seems to drive her mad.
Mm.
So it's kind of a ghost story, but it's also examining sort of very human relationships. Beautifully
Yeah.
shot by Freddie Francis. The cinematography is incredible. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I've
Definitely.
unfortunately never seen it, but I have heard about it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film. I think even
You
if you
have
don't
done.
like if you don't like
Sorry.
horror films, I think you could still like it. It's that kind of movie.
Hmm. You have done a video of it as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I remember that, I think. Um, all right. Jumping to 1962, you have a film which I don't really know anything about, but it's one of your favorite directors
yeah.
who have made
Pasolini.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mamma Roma with Anna Magnani, who's incredible in it. She's playing this woman who's she's been a prostitute, but she's trying to get away from that life and bring up her young child. But her ex pimp comes back to sort of torture her. It's a beautiful film. It's sort of near realist film, but it's very beautiful. It's
Hmm.
got sort of spiritual overtones to it. I just think
Okay.
it's an absolutely incredible movie. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Mine is Knife in the Water, the
Ah,
Polanski
yeah.
film.
Valansky film. Yeah.
Uh, and you did a Polanski video not so long ago, and I'm happy you wrote something that you feel you picked it as number 6 or 7, didn't you, or
Yeah.
something on your list, and you thought maybe it should be higher. And I'm happy you wrote that because I really think it's an outstanding film, and in some ways a bit. Of course, it's appreciated by Polanski fans, but I think it's in some ways it's underappreciated by the world in general. I don't think that many people talk about this as a iconic film. I don't know,
Well,
but
after your comment on my channel, I thought about it and I thought you're right. It is actually a brilliant movie, and perhaps I'm underrating it. And what I'd
mm,
forgotten about it, I love the tactile sense of that film. When they run through the reeds and when they're on the
yes,
boat, you feel the sort of that you can feel the cabin around you, can't you? And
yes,
it's
exactly.
it's kind of makes you almost sweat when you're watching the
Yeah,
film.
it's almost like you're on the journey with them.
Yeah, you're
Yeah, and
trapped
I
in that
just
boat.
yeah. So it has that claustrophobic feel, but at the same time, it is there's some free spirit to it. It feels kind of cozy and not charming, but there's this relaxing feeling that the music, the jazzy score is. I love the whole thing about it.
Yeah, I think it's I've forgotten just that impression that you have. The sort of that's what I like about Polanski actually. That he really makes you feel you're inside the world. You can't get out of it almost.
Mm,
The sort of plastic sense in his films is amazing. Yeah,
yeah.
and also I like the relationship between the three people because
Yes.
there's a bit of black comedy there. It's not
Yes.
totally serious. I like that element of it.
Yeah, and you don't really know if it's a thriller, if it's not a thriller. It
Yeah,
it, it has an ambiguous feeling to it.
Yeah, I like that element a lot, actually.
Yeah, and Polanski, his films became, of course, bigger, but also a bit more graphic later in his work. And this is not really graphic at all.
No, not at all.
So,
No,
so I like that about it. Um,
sure.
and we talked about your favorite from the '62, didn't we?
Yeah, we've done. Yeah, Mamma Roma. Yeah,
Yeah. 1963. You have an Indian film.
yeah. Satyajit Ray. Mahanagar, I think it's pronounced. It's called the
Okay.
big. In the English, it's called the Big City.
Yeah.
Um, and it's got one of his favorite actresses, a very beautiful actress, Mukherjee, her name is, and she plays this young wife of a sort of lower class family, and she decides to go off and do her own job and have her own career, and that's the sort of conflict of it. But really,
Okay.
it's just a portrait of city life at that time in India, and it's beautifully shot. It's very human. It's very moving. Great
Mhm.
characters. And, you know,
Okay.
Sacha Rai did everything. You know, he did his own editing. He did his own score. You know,
Okay.
absolutely
Yeah.
incredible sort of polymath type thing.
Yeah. All right. I've never heard about it really before, so I had to research it before I started this video. So just what was it about, But cool. Have you been in India?
No, I've never been.
No. Okay.
I feel I ought
Uh,
to go at one point in my life because I've never been to Japan either. But
okay.
yeah, I feel I ought to go. Oh
Uh,
well,
then let me know if you go there.
I will do.
Uh, my favorite from '63 is The Birds, Hitchcock.
You know what? It's mine as well. But I just thought I picked something different. So, but yeah, The Birds is
Okay.
incredible, absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
And it's one of those films I think that the more you watch it, the better it gets as well.
I agree. And I think when I did a review on it, I think I said something like, I think this is the ultimate horror film that Hitchcock made.
Yeah, yeah, more so than Psycho. You're right. I think. Yeah,
Yes. And I also think it's better than Psycho.
yeah.
I think and also more scary. I can't really explain it, but there's something about also there isn't any music and you just hear the birds, the sound of it. It's so creepy.
The soundscape is amazing. That scene when she's sitting outside and the birds are gathering silently behind
Yes.
her, and then they just go, woof, you know, that's fantastically, you know. And what I didn't get when I first watched it as a kid, I was thinking about the birds, but then
Mm.
that whole thing of the sexual jealousy between the two women, and now it seems to be part of what's going on. That's really
Yeah.
disturbing.
Yeah, I agree, and also I also just how people react to these weird circumstances. That's also the great scene where they are in the city when they think if it's the world is going to end.
Yeah,
And just how people have different reaction to these things. I found it fascinating. It actually also it has a great way of explore humanity.
yeah. Because I know the scene you mean where she's in that cafe and
Yeah.
she walks around the corner and there's that woman just staring at her and saying, "This is your fault." And
Yes,
that's an incredible scene.
it
Yeah,
is. So yeah, and it's and the end scene is also brilliant.
yeah, yeah,
And again, the sound in that scene
yeah,
it's almost like music in a way.
yeah. I agree. It's eerie, isn't it? It's strange.
It
That really
is.
affected me when I first saw it when I was about 12 or 13. It really affected me, that final scene.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand that. I felt the same. Um, Going to 1964, I can say I wasn't totally sure which film I would choose, but I end up choosing Marnie with Hitchcock as well. I just want to talk about Hitchcock for a moment. And although I acknowledge that Marnie has some issues,
Yeah.
but I do actually think there are moments in this I think is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. Like the hunting scene,
Yes.
that fantastic scene when she's stealing from the office.
Yes, exactly. It's
And
very suspenseful.
yeah, yeah, incredible.
And I there's also I love also the how should I say the not the end scene but the flashback scenes how it's filmed.
Yes. And yeah, yeah,
there's something. It's very disturbing. Although you can argue that maybe it's a bit cliche that we have seen many of these types of films later about people are having a childhood trauma and then something happens. So in that way it's a bit cliche. But I just love how it's edited together.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very strange film on it. It's one of those films where you're not quite sure how you feel about it, but you
Yeah,
can't forget it. It sort of stays
exactly.
with you, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not so keen on Sean Connery's character, but I do like Sean Connery's performance in it.
Yeah, his character is horrible because
Yeah, yes.
he effectively assaults her, let's be honest.
Yeah, and in the end, he's the hero in a way. It's a bit weird.
I know.
Yeah,
There are times in that movie where you want to punch him in the face, but yeah, okay. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. But what is your favorite from 1964, Mike?
I think I chose Culloden, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And uh hang on, sorry, I've lost my Culloden is this, it's a British film. It was made for television, and it's based on the Battle of Culloden, which was in 1745, and it was
Mm.
with the Scots and the Jacobites rebelling. And what he does is he recreates it, but he does it as a sort of historic, it was a modern newsreel. So he's
Mm.
like interviewing the people fighting, and he's showing it like
Okay.
on newsreel camera. And it was
Uh-huh.
way ahead of its time, and it actually makes a real impact. You think it's going to be a bit of a gimmick,
Mm.
but he actually showed how the British Army just basically killed all the Highlanders. It was genocide,
Okay.
and it's a very powerful piece. It and
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's brilliantly filmed on a low budget, black and white
Mm.
photography. But when I first saw it as a teenager, I thought, "Oh my God, wow!" It's like history suddenly becomes like boof in your face, and you
Mm.
realize the politics and the meaning of it, and how we're still sort of living through the same problems. It was incredible.
Mm. It sounds interesting. I You're not so keen on war films in general.
No, I'm not really. There's a couple
No.
I like, but mostly I get a bit, especially British war films. Oh dear, dear, oh dear.
But this sounds also a bit different. I have to check it out.
Yeah, you can find it on. It is out there on DVD and Blu-ray. You might be able to stream it from the BFI, actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Um, 1965. You have an Orson Welles film, and it's a Shakespeare.
yeah. It's an
Yeah.
adaptation of the Henry IV plays, and he plays Falstaff. And that, to me, that's the role that Orson Welles was born to play. This big, jolly Englishman with a big beard and a big belly, and he sort of falls foul of how politics is changing and the civil wars in England. I find that film really moving. I think it's beautifully made.
Mhm. I have unfortunately never seen it, but I have heard about it. You also did a, a Shakespeare video based on the same.
Yeah, I'm doing like a series of videos looking at the BBC did all of Shakespeare's
Yes,
plays, a series of them in the
exactly.
70s and 80s. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
did.
because I remember. Yeah, remember you talked about this as well in one of these videos. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. What?
Uh,
I didn't catch. What was your 64 film again? Sorry,
64. It was
Marnie.
Marnie.
Oh, right.
Yes,
Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
yes,
And what's
and
65? Is
The Sound of Music.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That was my mum's favorite film when I was growing up. I watched it
Oh,
many times.
so you know it quite well.
I do. I know the songs. I mean, I used to feel sorry for Christopher Plummer.
Yeah. But I think he wasn't so keen on it. But I think he understood later on maybe why it's so iconic as it is, and in some ways, when I think about Christopher Plummer, it's in this film.
Yeah,
Although he has done great works later in his career and probably better acting performance in other films, but this is just I love his performance in this, and I love all the songs. I think they are very catchy.
yeah. And Julie Andrews was perfect, wasn't she?
Yes. In Denmark, it is shown every Christmas.
Oh, it's a Christmas movie. Oh, great.
So Christmas Eve, I was waiting for the food, and then the Sound of Music was on, and then I thought, why not watch it again? So
Yeah.
yeah, I really love it. I also think it's quite moving. There's something about it. It's difficult to explain. It's not that it's necessarily a moving. Yeah, yes, it's a moving story, but it's not a, how should you say? There's nothing that tragic about it. But I feel something for it.
I think what's interesting about this, the Sound of Music is, you know, in those last scenes, they cross the mountains and they
Yes.
Julie Andrews' performance has changed and she's a bit more
Hmm.
sad and she's become a bit more wide. Did you feel that, or is
Yeah.
that just
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and you can say everything has changed for the whole family.
yeah?
So and that's just the end song. I also really love that, and yeah, I think it's I really find it moving, and but also it has a lot of humor as well.
Yeah.
Um, Going to 1966, you have a Bergman film.
Have I? Did I put Bergman film?
I think you wrote a Persona, but maybe if you have chosen
Oh,
another one.
Persona. Yeah, I love Persona. It's a very short, sharp cut of a movie. I think these two women. One of them is an actress, and she stopped speaking, and it's her nurse looking after her, and it's the relationship between the two of them. And they start their personalities start to merge into each other. I think it's an incredible film. Actually, every time I watch it, I see different things in it, and the acting is brilliant. You know, Liv Ullmann and BB Anderson are just incredible. Yeah.
I've never seen the whole film. I have seen some of it, but I never really got through it, I must admit. I like, I think Bergman is a great director, but there was something about it I had to, maybe it was the time period I saw it. But what I will say, I'm going to watch it again.
Okay.
But I know many people admire this film, and I definitely understand why you feel. If I'm looking for your point of view,
Sure.
uh, mine is a bit more obvious. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. My favorite
No,
film when I was a kid, that was. I loved it, and I still love it now. It's so good.
it's really just iconic, and yeah, I love every character in it.
Yeah. Eli Wallach is fantastic in it. He's so funny.
Yes.
Such a great performance.
It is really funny film, although it can also be serious. It has a great mixture of both.
Yeah, that's right. Because when I was a kid, I used to find it really funny. And I loved the sound of the gunshots and that. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
But then when you watch it when you're older, you realize all the stuff about the Civil War is actually quite moving, you know.
Hmm.
And you're just seeing all these men just dying. What these
Yeah,
three guys are trying to find this cash box, but they're all dying around them, you know. It's kind of
exactly. It's a
yeah,
bit there's an irony to it.
yeah. And
Um,
a lot of people find that film quite cynical, but I don't see it that way. I think it's telling its story and it's in a different way, you know, not like the usual old-fashioned Western, you know, it's just a different way of doing it, I think. But
I agree. Yeah, and in terms of its length, I think it goes by very fast.
yeah, absolutely.
So it's not a boring 3 hour movie.
No. Oh no. I mean, when I watched it first as a 9-year-old on my own, and I watched the whole thing for 3 hours, you know.
How did you watch it as a 9 year old on your own? Did you just watch it in TV or?
Yeah, I think it was on late afternoon, early evening. I can't remember actually, but I just remember watching it on my own, which was quite an overwhelming experience for a 9-year-old. It's like, you know what? It's interesting what you say because like it isn't boring and it goes by really quickly, but you know, there's a sense of like time in that film, like you're in
Yeah.
eternity. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
when he rides off into the desert at the end, he seems to ride on forever.
Yeah.
You know?
True. True. And yeah, I think that scene couldn't have been made today.
Yeah, and it's great. I love that sequence. Just so beautiful.
Yeah, and the music is
Yeah.
is is brilliant as well. But yeah, we did when we did talk about your favorite from that year. So we go to 1967, and your favorite is Point Blank.
Yeah, John Boorman. It's great that film with Lee Marvin. It's a revenge, kind of gangster revenge thriller, and it's all set in LA. But the thing is, it's sort of influenced by the Nouvelle Vague, and it's all sorts of tricksy elements. And I can't get enough of that film. I absolutely love it. I love the opening where Lee Marvin appears to be killed, but then he comes back from the dead, and there's this wonderful shot, and he's sort of spread over the barbed wire of the prison, like this kind of insect. It's great fun. I love it. Absolutely.
I have not seen it, unfortunately, but I know about it. I've heard about it. So that will also be one of the ones I have to check out. My favorite from that year is a French film called Les Samouraï.
Yeah, with Alain Delon. Yeah.
Yes. And I just find it, in some ways, I find it very cool in its atmosphere, and yet there's a sadness about it, which I really admire. It's a sort of not a typical hitman film. So I can't really explain it better than that, I think. But I love just the feel to it, and the bittersweet ending also.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very beautiful film, even though it's quite downbeat, isn't it? It's quite grey somehow, but it's a weirdly beautiful film. And every shot and every sequence just feels so perfect almost. I can't.
Yeah, it's really well made.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1968. Your favorite is a Polanski film.
Yes. And another horror film, Rosemary's Baby,
Yeah,
where Mia Farrow has the devil's kid. Yes,
exactly.
nice, charming subject matter. But that movie for me, like one of the great horror films. And again, one of the things I like about it is it's so funny. It's blackly comic, Like Ruth Gordon character, the next door neighbor says, "Oh, come on," and she's actually working for the devil.
Yeah.
It's so modern as well. Like the relationship between Mia Farrow and John Cassavetes, it moves like the portrayal of sort of relationships on so much, just casually in a horror film. I really admire that. I think it's incredible. And again, that sense of that apartment, you get the real sense of that building, the apartment that you're in.
True. I have seen this film, and I really like it. So I understand what you mean, and also how you describe the apartment.
Yeah.
Polanski has actually a great way of filming apartments in all of his films.
And
actually,
it's space. It does it so well. It's so clever.
Yeah, the same with Repulsion. Isn't it Repulsion? Yeah, the Tenant, and also the Pianist. There's also some great apartment scenes there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially when
yeah. But yeah, it's very iconic, that film.
Yeah.
Perhaps his most that and Chinatown is his most famous.
Yeah, I would have said so. Yeah.
Yeah. Mine. I was thinking about two films: 2001: A Space Odyssey and Once Upon a Time in the West. I don't know which one I would choose, but I think 2001 because I think it's so influential.
Yeah. Well, I think both of them are two of the best films ever made. No question. Yeah.
I agree. I like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly better than as a person, just to enjoy the film as an experience. But I think there are perhaps more substance.
Yeah.
To Once Upon a Time in the West.
I totally agree. I think Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is so fun.
Yes.
But Once Upon a Time in the West, it's such a beautiful film. It's so beautifully constructed. The performances are incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
great music as well.
Oh, yeah. And Henry Fonda's face. Henry Fonda's face is incredible.
Yeah. There you can really see he could also play bad guys,
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to 1969. You have a Western.
Yeah, The Wild Bunch, Sam Peckinpah. Very violent, about a group of horrible men doing horrible things in Mexico. But I don't know what it is about that movie. You could say it's just a chase film, really, but I think it's incredibly well made. One of the greatest pieces of filmcraft in American film, I think. And it really gets to you. That end shooting scene, every time I'm sort of like, I catch my breath. It's so, I was obsessed with that film when I was in my 20s. I watched it again and again. Probably not very healthy for me, but I did. because I just, it's such a raw film. It's so you can almost smell the people on the screen. You can smell the sweat and the tequila, But at the same time, the editing is so beautifully controlled, and it's such a moving portrait of these guys who their time in the West is coming to an end, and it's very violent. It's very powerful, like almost like a myth.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's also one of the ones I have to check out. I know about it, but I haven't seen it.
We could do a follow-up video when you've watched them and say what you think.
I feel like I have to, I feel a bit guilty. I haven't seen that many of your favorite films, but I'm really happy for all of your choices here because it also gives me how should I say, a bigger, wider, what is the word?
Scope, is it? A scope of the 60s? I don't know.
Yeah, and just films in general, But I also have a film I don't think you have watched called Mississippi Mermaid.
I've never seen it. So there you go, you see.
Yeah. And I rewatched it last year to make a review on my channel on it, and I really think it's a great film. It's a bit different, but a very unique romantic thriller.
And it's Catherine Deneuve, isn't it? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And both the main characters, they're not really nice people at all, but in some ways you feel for, and you feel also a bit for their love for each other. It's a bit weird, and I like that I think it has sort of a sensibility about it that Truffaut could make a romantic film. There's also a thriller about people you don't like.
Because I noticed one of the other films that you put was Days of Wine and Roses, which is also that's a romantic film about two people who are not that likable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but sometimes these types of films fascinate me if I'm moved about it or I get hooked.
Yeah, sure.
It's also good to see a film where it's not necessarily good guys. It's good to see people with some dilemmas and flaws, and then doing some things that shouldn't do. So yeah, if you ever have the chance to watch it, then let me know.
Yeah, there's quite a few Truffaut films that I haven't got around to seeing, so I must catch up. Yeah, I'll watch that Mississippi Mermaid.
I think I'm not saying it's some sort of underrated masterpiece, but I think it has something about it.
Okay, I'll check it out because I like
and you can definitely see some Hitchcock inspired things in it, especially Vertigo.
So I'm expecting The Bride Wore Black to be in your 70s video. Is that right?
I haven't thought about that yet. Now I have to think. All right, I can see we have 1 minute left.
Yeah.
So we managed to get through every film.
And we also we decided there was two films that we agreed upon that were overrated, didn't we? There was 8.5 and Doctor Strangelove.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think they are bad films, but they are not for me.
Yeah, same here. Doctor Strangelove is too cold.
Yeah, exactly. A bit boring. Yeah.
And also the opening sequence of 8.5, that's brilliant. The rest of the film you can keep.
Yeah, I think it has some scenes I like, but I also like the end. But it's not for me.
Yeah.
But Mike, thanks for doing this video with me.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. It's been great. I love it.
And let's do another one another time.
Okay, sure. Definitely.
If you're up for it.